Everyone, we'll start the presentation in about 1 minute. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. We'll start the presentation in about 30 seconds. We're just waiting for people to get in and get settled. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast, Proactively Managing Fatigue, Torex Gold's Roadmap and Multi-Year Strategy, sponsored by SafeStart. This is Alan Ferguson, Associate Editor at Safety and Health Magazine. I'm moderating today's event. Thank you so much for joining us, and before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. As a disclaimer, the views of today's speakers are their own and do not necessarily affect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health Magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the council or the magazine endorses those items. After today's presentation, we'll conduct a question and answer session with our speaker. If you have a question, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type your question and press the send button. We welcome your questions at any time during today's event. You don't have to wait for the Q&A to begin. We might not get to every question, but the good news is unanswered questions will be forwarded to today's sponsor. Also, after this presentation, we'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey, and I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. This webcast will be archived so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, please visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events, or you may also receive a link in our post-event email. With that, let's introduce our speakers. With us today are Nelson Bodnerchuk and Emily Tetzloff. Nelson is the Vice President of Health and Safety at Torex Gold Resources Inc. Nelson started as the Director of Operational Systems, overseeing critical aspects of the successful construction startup and operation of the greenfield build at the ELG open pit mine and processing plant. He now supports the safe operations of the Morelos mine complex in the state of Guerrero in Mexico. Nelson has more than 21 years of global multi-commodity operating leadership experience. He also has a degree in electrical engineering and is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt. Emily is a health and safety project analyst with Torex Gold for its fatigue risk management program and the SmartCap wearable fatigue detection system. Emily has worked in the mining industry since 2015 as a researcher and corporate health promotion specialist with MediWell Services. Emily is a doctoral candidate at the University of Ottawa and registered kinesiologist. Again, we thank you all for tuning in this presentation. Nelson, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here today, folks. I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation overview, and then I will turn it over to Emily after I introduce the company and what we're about. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about who we are, to give you some context around who Torex is, where we operate, what we're up to, and then talk through the actual health and safety management system and how fatigue risk management fits into that and how it integrates with it. And then we'll be specifically talking about the metrics and the system and how we've been progressing through the ups and downs of the project, as well as where we are now with things. It's been a few years that we've been working together, Emily and I, on this project, and where we are going over the next few years with our roadmap as we move underground. And then the last part will be some key highlights and takeaways for the folks listening in today. And then we'll do a Q&A period. And I'll be moderating throughout. Emily's going to be doing the bulk of the technical talking today, because she's been really leading this project from a coordination standpoint from day one. And I'll kind of jump in with some of the really good questions that come in, as I'm sure there will be. So if we look at the next slide, I'll just introduce Torex Gold. And so, for the last 4 years, Torex has hit its guidance to the market on safety, environment, production, and of course, costs. And so Torex Gold is an intermediate Canadian-based gold producer engaged in mining, developing, and exploring our wholly owned single asset. It's about 29,000 hectares in Guerrero State in Southwest Mexico. And our property is called the Morelos property. We call it the Morelos complex. It's located about 180 kilometers southwest of Mexico City. And I'm sitting here today with Toronto, Ontario, Canada, sitting in the background of our corporate head offices. And Emily's based in Ottawa. She goes to the university there and is completing her doctorate. I will just speak a little bit about Torex for a moment. We've got a couple of really key aspects of the company that set us apart from our operating peers. And the reason I wanted to bring up these aspects today is because I know everybody on the call isn't necessarily in the mining industry, but I would highly recommend any company who's looking to either transform their operations or continuously improve, and I know that's a big thing nowadays, it's how you win the game, I'd highly recommend that you look into these 3 or 4 aspects of building a company from a philosophical perspective. And one of those things is systems leadership theory. I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a moment. Principles-based, it's a principles-based organizational set of systems that help people identify how they should be working together. We've also got a system that we use, and this is one of the reasons why they're sponsoring today, is we've been implementing the smart cap system almost in tandem with, but just a little bit after the Safe Start system, is what I call it. We've integrated that into our safety, our overall integrated safety system, and we based that on a book by an Australian author named Christian Sylvester around Habit Safe, and he talks about in the book the 3 generations of safety, where the first generation is about compliance and rules and practices or processes. The second generation is about getting leadership involved and getting the behaviors right of the leaders in the field, and then in turn the team. And the third generation is really going subconscious and understanding that humans are fallible and finding ways to reinforce the systems around the people. I always go back to those layers of Swiss cheese from a theoretical standpoint. What controls do we have in place, and are they operating? And they're all imperfect controls. And so today we're talking a little bit about an imperfect control with the smart cap system. And we'll talk about all the things that we love about it and all the things that we have to work on to make sure that we can get it in place and that it's functioning 100% of the time. But I will just pause a moment and just mention that Torex Gold is really principles based, and it's the second largest gold producer in Mexico over the last 3 or 4 years, next to Penasquito. So if we move on to the next slide, you'll see the 3 pillars that I've based, the safety at the Morelos property on. When we talk about, we hear a lot about zero harm in our industry, in mining and manufacturing and oil and gas and energy. And so when we talk about safety at our property, we talk about no lives lost, no lives harmed by occupational illness or injury. And that's based on 3 pillars, right? We've got the leadership pillar, the systems pillar, and the culture pillar. And really, when it comes down to it, I'm going to start with the culture one, because that's a word that's often, I don't want to say misused, but it's often used in a wide variety. It's very hard to pin down scientific. A lot of what we do, especially what we're talking about today with Emily, is the data-based, data-driven decision-making that we do at Torex. And that's because we have the systems in place and the leadership bought into that. But the culture, if I'm to talk about culture, I got to talk about mythologies a little bit. This is coming from system leadership. And really, a mythology is just the assumption or belief that a particular behavior demonstrates a positive or negative value. So it's a values-based decision that people make about either their leadership or how people should behave within their workplace or within the organization. And then the culture is formed when people share those mythologies. So when they share those stories, when they talk about, the things that are happening in the company and why certain things are happening, or why behaviors they're seen behaviors by certain leaders, that's where you really get into building that culture. And so what we've always set out to do at Torex is build a positive culture, positive working culture. But I've taken that and said it starts with a positive safety culture. And so in order to get a positive safety culture, you have to have the right systems, because a bad system will beat a good person down any day of the week. So we've really focused, I've been at Torex now for about 10 years. We've really focused the first 5 years when it was on the operations side, we really focused on putting systems in place that drove the right behaviors without unintended consequences. And it took us a long time to get it right. We've got things like the business process framework or asset management framework, which really focuses on work management, analyze and improve, those types of work functions. We put in programs around excellence programs around just for our supervisors. So we've got you'll see SEP and LEP are some acronyms on the screen there, but really they really focus in, they're tailored towards, the programs tailored towards, giving our supervisors and then our superintendents and our managers in the leadership excellence program a way to improve their, what most people refer to as soft skills, which I think are the hard skills. And then also it links it back to the technical side of things as well. It's not just classroom training, it's activities based, it's designed for adult learning. And so we've got a bunch of other things in that middle column that you'll see, where 4-step incident management system, the 4-layer safety rules and safety system, the contractor management system, safe start and technical, the technical side of things and how we integrate what we're doing with, for instance, Smart Cap with those four kind of mental states that you can get into when incidents and accidents occur. The last thing I'll talk about on this slide before I move on is I probably spent the first 6 months when I took the safety reins of the company to really focus in on accountabilities and authorities and getting extremely clear with every level of the organization on what people were accountable for and what people were authorized to do when it comes to safety. So really try to avoid the person working at the face, their boots are worn out and they're saying, well, budgets are tight and I shouldn't be going to get new boots, or their supervisors, we don't have money for that. And there's a really hard way to get the form filled out so that they can get a chit so they can go to the PPE desk and get the PPE. We've changed that up. That's when I talk about systems, that's really what we wanted to drive was, how do you make it easy for the person to get all the equipment they need in good condition, working order, and then double check that they're working on the right things. And that's when it comes to leadership, accountabilities, and authorities. Once those leaders are clear on that, they can really focus on getting out in the field and creating visible, felt leadership, right? And we've really worked on improving our reporting culture. Now at Torex, we've got two main things going on at our one property right now. We've got an operation that produces about 440 to 470,000 ounces of gold a year. There's a filter tailings facility, a processing plant that processes the gold. It's got a lot of nasty chemicals in it, cyanide, bisulfide, and other things, mercury as such. And then we've got the open pit mines and the underground mines. We're also going to be building an underground mine connected through a 7.5 kilometer tunnel under the river on the property, called the Media Luna underground mine. And so that's introducing a whole layer of new risks. And so that's going to come online probably within the next 2 to 3 years as we ramp up to full production of 7,500 tons a day. And we'll be producing gold, silver, doré bars with copper concentrate coming out of there as well. We have 30% copper production. So we've got we're diversifying our commodities a little bit just from the gold, silver, doré bars. And we've got a lot of new risk going that deep underground and through the access through that tunnel. So as you can imagine, the risk profile of our company, everything starts with safety. You see a lot of those stickers. I was actually driving behind somebody who had one of those yellow stickers yesterday. It said safety first. And when we prioritize safety above everything else, it also leads to, a quality culture and one of continuous improvement. And so if we move to the next slide, we'll see the next, the next pattern I want to talk about, which is really key to some of our success. So we started talking with the Safe Start folks based out of Belleville, Ontario, just up the road east of here, probably about 4 years ago now. And we had already hit about 10 million hours, lost time injury free, fatality free. And we've repeated that again. And I was worried when we got to the end of that streak, somebody hurt their finger and had to take a couple of days off, and everybody's worried about the streak ending. It's not about the streak ending. It's about creating that culture and reinforcing it and continuously learning. And we were looking at around the same time that 10 million hour streak was coming to an end on how we were going to repeat that. And I've mentioned this to many people in the past because there's a big debate in the safety industry about, safety philosophy and how do you reward for safety and how you don't reward. And what I always come back to is leaders have to get out in the field and show that they've got to build trust with their teams, and they've got to make sure that they understand if people are fit for duty for that day. And our job in the background to support and service personnel in the company, if we run those functions, is to make sure that we're supporting with the right systems, that we're making them efficient, that we're making them effective, and that we're getting leaders where they should be, out in the field or at the desk doing the work they're paid to do, right? Once the leaders have cleared the deck of all that administrative stuff that tends to build up in a lot of companies, you can really get those folks working properly and building that trust in the field. And so the Safe Start team came along and kind of took what the Habit Safe folks have done and we were learning about through reading a book, and they've actually put a program around it. And so that what you've got on the screen here is how we've kind of internalized it, where you've got that state to error risk pattern where, those 4 states, rushing, frustration, fatigue, complacency, really contribute to, if you're in one or more of those 4 states, contributes to you to taking your eyes and your mind off a task, putting yourself into the line of fire or not noticing that you're in the line of fire, and then maybe losing your balance, grip, traction, right? And when we talk about that pattern, it's 24/7, right? Whether it's at home, road, or at work, you're in between driving, over 95% of those injuries are caused by this state to error risk pattern. And so as I started understanding this pattern a little bit better, I can't speak for the rest of the team because it's pretty easy to pick up. We started diving into, well, how do we integrate this into our first generation health and safety management system, or integrated management system already? Because it's not a layer on top, it's kind of an integrated piece, right? And so how do we not just, I say drop coconuts out of the tree at people and throw things at them from corporate and it's just kind of hitting them randomly? How do we make sure it fits together and it seems like we have a coherent plan? And so we integrated Safe Start, and then shortly after we started layering in things that help us make data-driven decisions around this state to error risk pattern. SmartCap's the biggest thing it's the furthest thing that we're along on this. And it has, the wearable tech that we're going to be talking about today. And then at the end of that, one of the biggest pillars of our culture at Torex is the stop and correct. So anybody, anywhere, at any time can stop work and correct it. If you have an unsafe condition or you see an unsafe behavior, you have the authority to both stop that work. You will also be held to account if you don't, or if you do, you can be called to account to explain it so people can learn from it, right? And so we're really working hard to build that culture. The other thing that I failed to mention at the beginning of the slideshow here when we're talking was, we've got a fairly new workforce in Grow State located in our property. It's a very steep terrain. So there's probably about 10 kilometers by way of the crow flies. There's another mine site south of the river, but that's a 6-hour drive on the road because there's no bridges. It's a very rugged terrain. And so we didn't really have a workforce about 6 years ago. We started operating that was used to working in a heavy industry or in mining. So we had to do a lot of work on the safety end and a lot of work on the training side of things, both in the classroom and in the field, to make sure that people were working safe, that they're working efficiently, that they understood what they had to do, and they're clear on their roles. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about our safety system, our integrated safety system. And really the rushing and the frustration, those states to error, I want to pause for a moment. And when you think about, for everybody on the phone, if you just think about the last time you were almost injured or injured and what you were doing, you probably weren't bungee jumping or doing any extreme sports. You're probably washing the dishes, or like me, walking down the stairs looking at your phone, and you twisted your ankle or you slipped down the last couple steps and banged your elbow, right? And walking down my stairs at home, there's 3 steps coming from one level to the next. That's not really going to pose a lot of risk, so it's less hazardous. But when we do things at work, and I used this example yesterday with some folks in a meeting, because we kick off every meeting at Torex with a safety share. We talk a little bit about a story, and then we have a call to action. And so this is where I'll slide safety share into this before I hand it back over to Emily in a minute. When you have somebody that works underground basically 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for their rotation, and then they take the time off, Working by a jumbo drill that's, loud, noisy, and extremely hazardous if you're not, quote unquote, paying attention, could be hazardous to your health. And a moment of inattention could cost you a finger, a hand, or even your life. And so that's really why we've implemented the Safe Start system at Torex. And that's really why we're looking for ways to help keep people's mind and eyes on task and avoid the line of fire, especially as well as balance protraction. But really, fatigue was one of the main drivers. And if we go to the next slide, I'll just frame up briefly what our integrated safety system looks like. This is a little bit of a boiled down version. It's based on plan, do, check, act, where in the top left corner, I believe that is on your screen, you'll see how we identify and analyze risks. And that's linked to our enterprise risk management system. And then we get into managing and controlling those risks, putting controls in place, and what type of things are we ready for when incidents do occur? How do we react to incidents at both an emergency preparedness level and a crisis management level? And how do we design, engineer safety into our systems and our workplace? And we get into the monitoring, the metrics piece, and talk about what data are we grabbing, why is it important, what's the purpose of measuring this thing. There's lots of data nowadays on the, I call it the kit that you could buy when you buy a new piece of equipment. Everything comes with a computer on it, right? We all walk around with supercomputers in our phones and on our wrists, and I think eventually in your glasses. And so what kind of data are you're collecting, and what are you doing with it? So that's a big thing for us when we take that systems approach. And then of course, reviewing that performance, that accountability piece, right? We talk about leaders held accountable. We also have the safety practitioners and the people in the field and the people in the engineering team being held accountable to hit their objectives as well, which is stitching this whole system together. And there's more systems than just this one, but this is the kind of the core for Torex when it comes to how we interact with people and build our culture. So if we move on to the next slide here, you'll see how we started implementing the system. And this is where I'll transition over Emily in just a moment. But really, you could see the four layers, or the 4 steps of our integrated safety system across the top. And we basically implemented SmartCap as part of that process. And think about it from a perspective of, again, I'm a Six Sigma guy. I used to start my career in electrical engineering and got an opportunity to learn Six Sigma. And I've always taken that pattern and applied it in my daily life, but my daily work life, to help continuously improve, right? And so from a safety perspective, that's the name of the game, eh? Learn from your incidents and put corrective actions in place to help improve that and never repeat those incidents. And we do treat, the last thing I will mention, and we learned from the report you see on the page here, we do treat our low-level first aids and medical aids injuries much different than how we treat our lost times and up, right? And there's that severity, the high, medium, low severity that we apply to each injury to understand what the potential was for it to be a fatality or a disabling injury. And with that, I'll turn you over to Emily, who I have to say from day one has really led the way on being, she wears many hats, and she's got the data analysis and the project management, and she works with our team at site. There's a lot of folks at site that we work with. There's also a few folks I do want to mention here from the SmartCap team, just as a shout out to Brady Marcus and Omar Jimenez. They work for Wenco Mine, and they have that SmartCap program. And it's not just for mining companies, it's for any company who wants to manage fatigue with folks driving vehicles around, and maybe more than that. But if you really want to manage fatigue and have database decisions, that's where you want to go. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Emily for the more technical aspect of what we did when we started things out on this journey, probably about 4.5 years ago. Over to you, Emily.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Nelson. Yeah, so like Nelson said, we're going to kind of frame the rest of the presentation around those kind of 4 pillars of how safety systems operate at Torex, and then walk you through this phased approach that we've taken specifically geared at the management of fatigue. And so, like Nelson said, this journey kind of started about 4 years ago for us. So I originally got connected in with Nelson and the team at Torex through the Ministry of Labour in Ontario. They were doing a funded research program, bridging together students with industry partners to allow them to kind of build collaborations. And so when I first started working with Nelson, the task that Torex gave me was to do a big data analysis for them. So I took their entire health and safety incident data, so everything from a near miss to an incident, an accident, or an equipment damage, and did a massive, I think it was like 120-page report for them, and got really, really deep on the entire history of this company. And essentially from that, we identified that fatigue was a remaining critical hazard for the company. And more specifically, it was something that was affecting the mobile equipment operators at their open pit sites. And so that was kind of our first stage of identifying what one of the problems are that we could tackle together moving forward. And so what we basically did from there is we put together a really great team. We built a team with the health and safety officers on site. They've got a team of really great physicians there that operate with them, and then brought together some other experts on fatigue risk management, big data analytics, and statisticians from my university here in Canada. And so from that, we were able to basically figure out what's a path forward where we can work together and design something here that can help mitigate the risk management, manage it well, and have an opportunity for growth and expansion over the next couple of years for the company. And so a big part of this, though, was knowing that we were going to be operating across some language barriers. We're going to be operating remotely in some of these cases. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to introduce any additional hazards or risks to the operators or the site as a whole. And so one of the first steps that we did with this was we approached the unions. So there was 2 unions that operate in Mexico with the individuals on this site. And so we talked to them about it to figure out if they thought it was a critical hazard that we should be addressing as well. Of course, got their buy-in instantly. And we also pursued full ethical approval as well to ensure that the introduction of this and something with wearable health data wasn't going to be crossing any barriers of worker to management kind of dynamics. And so we were able to secure that as well, which gave us a really nice foundation to know that pursuing this project was going to be for the good of all of the workers on site. And so with this kind of identifying the problem, identifying that it was a supported problem by others that care about these individuals with the union, we looked to the literature, we looked to what's out there on the market for helping to identify and manage this risk. And basically what we found is that the gold standard for anything to do with fatigue risk management is the use of EEG. So this is the idea of having a little electrodes all over your head. It's been something that we've used for, I think, about 100 years now in the medical field. But typically it's done in hospital. It's done in a sleep science setting to basically understand how the brain is working. And it's looking at all different connections between the central nervous system and all of our communication and electrical impulses for how our brain is functioning. So typically, although it was always done in that clinical setting, we needed to know if there was ways that this could translate to the field and to site. But a bit of kind of foundation of it is that the electrical impulses that are happening in your brain are happening at different frequencies, depending if you're alert and awake and presenting and speaking to somebody and you've got really active, great concentration and capacity. So I'm probably in a beta wave right now. But that the more we get relaxed, we move into an alpha wave. It's a little bit slower. Theta waves and delta waves are then us moving towards sleep, with delta waves being the deepest sleep that you can achieve in over the course of the night. Now, EEGs are basically measuring all of these different factors. But the really great thing is that there's been some transitions recently where they've been able to harness that technology of a traditional EEG and translate it into field wearable devices. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about for the remainder of this, is one of the technologies for that, like Nelson mentioned, called SmartCap. And there's other things on the market that can do fatigue risk management or fatigue monitoring as well. Often they have to do with your eye behavior, what's your blink rate, where's your gaze going, kind of line of sight detection, things like that, or heart rate variability using other physiological metrics for it. But with the recent movement to being able to do field wearable EEG, this is really the gold standard of where you want to go, because it's giving you a leading indicator. It's a proactive tool. It's not waiting for somebody to be placed into a slow brainwave or at risk of a micro sleep. It's giving you really proactive content. And so from this we identified fatigue was a problem. We identified that there is new tech that's available out there, and then did our due diligence of looking at who was in that market. We ended up selecting the Smart Cap technology. And this one is a wearable tool. It's the little band that you see here on the corner. Can either be worn as a headband or it can go snapped up inside of a hard hat. And essentially it just has those little electrodes that are across the front of the device. The operator gets into the cab of their vehicle or to the station that they're working at, activates it with a screen that's sitting in the cab of the truck or mounted on their workspace, and connects instantly. And through Bluetooth, all of that data is recorded live. They're not only getting instant feedback in the cab of the truck, where they're going to get audible alarms and alerts if their brainwaves or their fatigue state or ability to resist fatigue is changing, but also that data is all live going to whoever is in your dispatch or whoever is in your safety team that's responsible for helping to manage it. And so the way this system works is that we're aiming to be in level 2s and level 3s. That means that thinking back to that brainwave chart, we're having really rapid, good concentration. We're able to operate with a good level of alertness. We can self-detect other risks that are coming up around us. But when we move to 3+ or level 4s, this means that we're starting to become at risk, and we're at risk of a microsleep possibly taking place. But this device is so proactive that it's actually not waiting for you to have a microsleep. It's actually going to be giving you alarms well in advance of that, so that you have the opportunity to self-manage and choose to engage in behaviors that could help mitigate it. So letting you know that it's time to check in with your supervisor and see if you can take a rest break, see if you can have water or food, open the windows of the truck, whatever it might be, to help change your state. So once we basically selected that this was going to be the device that we wanted to trial with the site and see if it was going to be something that would help us manage this risk, we did a full risk review. So Torex has one of the safety systems they have in place. Part of it is a full risk review panel. And we also did a change management plan as well to look at everything from who's in charge of the maintenance of the trucks, and is this something that could fit within there? Is it going to cause any changes to line of sight based on where the mount is going to be? Is it going to be distraction to the operators as they get used to it, and therefore their eyes or their attention's off the road? So we did a full risk review with that. The entire team on site assisted with that. And basically the end result was that we decided that this was going to be a tool that could help the company and not have any additional risk. So from there, we decided to go nice and slow. So this is part of our phased approach. We didn't want to just fully commit to saying, okay, this device looks great, looks like it functions. It had already been field validated by another research institution in Australia, and another one as well. So we knew it worked, and we knew it had been used in the field by other companies, but we wanted to know that for our very specific and unique context of a rural location in Mexico, was it going to be the right fit? And so we did a nice little pilot test. We took a group of operators. We put it out to everybody that was in the mobile equipment group that was operating one of the Komatsu off-road haulage trucks, and basically said to them who is interested or willing to be part of this pilot crew of early adopters and work through the kinks of this with us. And so we ended up getting 17 different operators that jumped at the chance to get to do it over 3 different crews. We brought in specialty trainers that did full modules of training with these operators, not only in the classroom and teaching them how the device worked, but really going into the details about, okay, this is capturing some of your health data, but it's converting it using different algorithms. So nobody is actually getting your raw EEG data. Those that are having access to your data from this, so how many alarms and what state you're in, are all medical professionals or on the health and safety team. So we talked a lot about the security of their information and who could even access it, but then more importantly, what or why they were accessing it. So really reiterating that there is a 0 penalty clause with how we're using this data. So at no point in time does receiving a level 4 alarm mean that you are going to be at risk of losing your job or having some other penalty placed on you. So we did this training with all of those frontline operators that were going to be in the cabs of the truck, but also their supervisors, anyone else on the safety management team. We did it with all the dispatchers who are in their control room as well. So really ensuring that everybody that was going to be engaged in the project could ask any questions and get clarification as they needed. At this point as well, we also really worked on developing the systems that could support this. So making sure that we had tools and policies in place. So things like an operator fatigue risk assessment. So if an operator was receiving alarms or warnings, what could we do to help them? Do we have the training in place to help support them with behavior change at home, to help them sleep better at night if that's part of the problem, and really strengthen the policies that would surround this system as well. So what I want to share with you is a little bit of the data from this. We now we're 2 years into using this and have expanded this. We'll show you a roadmap in a second of how we've expanded this to well over 100 operators on site now, but just some data from that early adopter period to show how we really tried to implement this systematically so we could measure the success of it. So like I said, we had operators from 3 different crews. Our trial period spanned 70 days. We were collecting data live every minute of all of those days. So as each crew came onto shift, this site operates on a 10-10-10 schedule. So 10 day shifts, 10 night shifts, off for 10, and then you come back. And so what we did is we had each of those crews wear the device for those first 20 days, but I deactivated all of the alarms on them. So the operator was just wearing the device as if it was kind of a headband at this point, but weren't getting any live feedback on the screen, and they weren't getting any audible feedback as well. And so this was just allowing us to see how they could manage fatigue on their own. So as they got tired, as they needed to stop, did they do so? And how did they manage it on their own? Once they came back from their 10 days off, they put the device on again for their next 20 shifts, but we activated all of the alarms. So at this point, they now were getting that live feedback, audible and visual, and were able to kind of see if that was going to help change their behavior. We supplemented this with a whole series of pre and post intervention questionnaires to identify if they had a sleep disorder, some different demographic characteristics that are known to relate to fatigue. And then we also integrated some modeling at the end of it as well that looked at technology acceptance models. And so whether or not there was factors in play here that could be affecting it as well, such as like personal experience with wearable tech or subjective norms amongst their crew, whether there was comfort or functionality concerns that would deter them from wanting to use it. So really integrated a lot of different sleep science or fatigue science in it. So to highlight some of the data, first thing we looked at was operator acceptance. So these were 17 early adopters, people that volunteered to the program, but we didn't get perfect usage, which is completely what you would expect when you're integrating something so new to a workplace. So this shows our 17 different operators, the shifts that they chose to wear the devices versus the shifts they chose to not wear them, or where they weren't wearing them for a big number of hours. So you see we have some individuals that were well over 70% really keen to use it the second they got it. And then we had other operators like operator 1 and 8 who, although they said they wanted to, maybe had some resistance to actually using it as they were learning with the device. We also looked at usability, so all of the hours of utilization. So every time the system was activated and was recording values. And so basically within that pilot period alone, we were getting fatigue detection possible for about 77% of the time. And so, like I said, this is a really rural site. And so we were also addressing at this early phase some issues that we were experiencing with like the wireless signal that was allowing the data to connect. But other factors, like if someone was wearing a device but maybe had some hair in the way of one of the electrodes, or just didn't have a good fit, or didn't have it snug on their forehead, all of those factors would also make it where fatigue wasn't possible to detect. And so this was a really good learning period for us as well, where we had some individuals that were getting really great usability, were wearing the device a lot and were wearing it with good connectivity. And we had other individuals where we could use this data to go in and coach them individually and figure out, okay, maybe their head's a little bit of a different shape. And so we could figure out how to tighten it up or help them clean it, different hygiene. So making sure that the devices are going to read well. So we have been live collecting all of this data ever since, but we've basically can look at how much time are we spending in those active mental alertness states. So the level 2s, level 3s, as you can see, most of the time that's where we are. Very few times are we actually in level 3 and level 4, which is fantastic. But we did get level 4 alarms that occurred during the pilot period, and we of course have gotten some since. And then we were able to break it down by crew level. And now that we have more different types of vehicles in operation, we can not only say by crew, but we can say by type of vehicle being operated as well. Couple other things just to kind of show you. So like I said, we did those kind of 10 days and 10 days. And so this is just showing you day shift to night shift. And so interestingly, about the same number of alarms occurred during the day shift as they did the night shift, but you can see a really dramatic peak that happens on day 10. So we know that as we do a swing shift, as we would expect, we're going to have a higher level of fatigue accumulate over time. And then as we kind of get into the latter half of the night shifts, you see it kind of go down a little bit here. And so just basically giving us the data and evidence to support whether or not we should be changing what the shift schedule looks like, or having data to say, okay, you know what, our interventions need to be different on day 10 and 11. We need our supervisors and our dispatchers to intervene a little bit more and get on the radio and call and check in and maybe change the shift, the break scheduling as well for these operators. We can look at it by participant as well. So by every single operator, we can look at their individual profile. As you can see from this, we have a couple operators that are accounting for a lot more of the alarms than others. We had operators that have never had an alarm and are fully able to self-manage their fatigue using the alarms and the warnings that are coming into play. And we have others that struggle a little bit more. And the great thing about this data is it's not, okay, participant 3 and 10 are our at-risk people. It's, okay, they're people that perhaps need some additional coaching. And we use the team of physicians on site to go in and say, okay, is there anything else going on? Are you suffering with some sleep apnea? Do you snore? Are you having difficulty falling asleep? We end through these conversations, I've found out about new babies in families and disrupted sleep from crying at nighttime, or people that are going through different moments of stress in their life and how that could be disrupting their ability to get restful sleep. So we use this as a tool to help coach the individual and not a way to say, okay, we've got some problem employees. That's not the mindset at all. We also look at it by the hour of the day to figure out if we had any different peaks and valleys. So of course, between 1 and 2 a.m., that's going to be a high risk period. And so we've shown that with our data, but then also between 8 and 9 a.m. So this is just the start of the shift as people are kind of getting into their day. So we know that's a risk period for us as well. The other really great thing about this device, SmartCap connects it with mapping. So we can see actually our hot spots on the mine site. So in the open pit here, we can figure out where our most high risk zones are. So a lot of the times it's our idling zones. So anywhere that they're waiting for their turn to dump ore into the crusher, maybe it's a shift meeting point. So somewhere where you're just kind of sitting stagnant in the car. And we know that that's where passive fatigue really can set in for operators. Okay, and so just going back to how we modeled this, so knowing that we had no alarms happening for this, and so this is just fatigue accumulating where they weren't receiving any live data to monitor it. So we can see that it's really quite high. The second that we started to activate the different alarming systems, so starting to activate here, we see that the numbers completely go down. So over the course of this, we were able to basically show that this could be used as a tool for behavior management on the individual level. So there was no intervention at this. So this isn't that supervisors were calling these operators and saying, hey, I see that you're getting alarms, you need to be doing something. This is entirely employees receiving their own at-risk alarms and then choosing to change their behavior to reduce their fatigue risk. So this shows that as well. So this is a graph that basically shows when an individual gets a warning alarm saying that you're at that level 3+, you're maybe starting to get a little bit groggy. When they receive that alarm, what was their percentage of chance that they could do something and not receive a level 4 alarm? And so as you can see, this is great. We've got some operators that were fully able to use those warnings and then not get an alarm. And we had others that were still kind of learning. So 75% of the time, this operator would get a warning and could intervene on their own, but 25% of the time they still advance to a level 4. And so that's an opportunity for us to do coaching as well. Okay, so on to our kind of monitoring metrics now. So we do live data on this all day, every day. So we now have 2 years of historical data where we can look at every single operator individually, every single crew. We can get individual traces over the course of a day. And all of this is monitored through the Life Hub system. So I remotely from here in Ottawa can log in and see if we have an operator with an alarm right now if I needed to. And so we do different reports every single morning at the start of shift and end of shift. We do alarm reports that go to any of the supervisors or dispatchers associated with those employees. And so this way, we're not waiting for the end of the month or the end of the quarter to say, oh, okay, we got this many alarms. We see the alarms before the operators actually leave the end of the shift. And that way their supervisor can talk to them and figure out a course of action to help improve it for the next shift. Okay, and so with that monitoring, so the data is great. We love numbers, and we love what we can do with that because there's a lot of power in that as a tool. But there's also fantastic opportunity just to get back into the field, and so we have people on site from the safety team and from companies that support us down there with training, where they actually go and get into the cab of the truck with the operators periodically and sit with them and figure out if there's having comfort issues, or is there additional training that we can do with them, and just live checking in on individuals' fatigue as well. And so just a couple of images showing the device. You can see the device on this operator's forehead here. You can barely see it, which is great. And then this is just an opportunity where we were working on the connectivity with one of the devices that was having a little bit of a challenge with getting good signal. So the second we see it happening, we can get into the field and work with the operators to fix it. So with the monitoring metrics as well, we've also set up an entire kind of KPI or KPM profile for these as well. So everything from metrics where we want to just reduce fatigue risk events in general, where we want to improve our operators' effectiveness at self-managing, where we want to improve our system usability, our system utilization, and then our technical performance as well. And so 2022 was our first year of full data. And so at the end of the year, we were able to sit down with the SmartCap team and use their expertise as well and design some metrics for this year and have goals for it. And so now at the end of every single quarter, we basically go in and check to see our progress towards each of these goals. And that way we're continuing to ensure that we're going to have forward momentum and address any concerns as there are critical issues as they arise. And then the last part of kind of that quadrant, the plan, do, check and act program that we run is reviewing performance. So on top of those daily monitorings, on top of being in the field to check in on things, we also do month end and quarterly reviews as well. So I've just captured a couple of the screenshots here that show kind of January, February, March, and April, basically seeing a massive decrease in the number of alarms that we're experiencing, consumed in by crew. So just the crew operators of this year, and looking at each individual person. So these are different types of trucks. So we've got dozers and drills and excavators, and seeing if there's trends with that as well, based on maybe the area of the mine that they're working in. Okay, so the little roadmap. So we basically have now achieved, I think we have about 166, that might be even higher now. I think we're closer to 200 operators that are wearing these devices in the field, 58 different pieces of mobile equipment that are operating on it. So we did this pilot project. We liked the data that we were seeing. We liked the results. We moved it to an open pit kind of expansion project to ensure that every operator in the open pit had access to these devices. We then extended that to any surface level vehicle. So that's where we added in the front loaders and the excavators and dozers and drills. And now we're into kind of the next phase of our programming. And that's that we also know one of our at-risk groups is individuals that transport our personnel. So because this is a remote site, individuals have to come in from the community or have to come in from the airport to get to the site. And so those are critical operators as well. And so wanting to get this protection to them. And so they're just operating kind of like mini buses or minivans. And so right now we're in a phase of advancement to get to them looped into the program as well. And then come 2024, approximately, when the site gets their underground operations, we'll be looking to expand to them as well. So I think Nelson's just going to add a note here on this one.
Yeah, and as we prepare to wrap up the presentation here and move into the Q&A, I see a couple of questions coming up. We'll address those in a bit. But what we've learned from this data-based approach, multi-year, we collect data and then we go back and tweak and continuously improve, is that, you know, we're going to move towards like an interlocking system, most likely, right? Where you have to be, we're in a SmartCap and it has to be functional, just like the brakes. We're not quite there yet with working out some of the kinks in that system because it is an add-on. But eventually we're going to be going underground, and eventually we'll take that phased methodical approach to make sure that that doesn't create any kind of efficiency or safety issues itself. But as we go through that process, and as we each step on this roadmap allows us to get learnings that we then apply in the field or decide not to apply for whatever reason. But in this case, you know, this imperfect layer of you know, monitoring fatigue. We did have a few incidents where people were measuring fatigue, and it was ruled out immediately. And we've had other incidents where the thing's not functioning, and then we had a side the berm or whatever, and now you've got to wonder, well, what happened and what are we doing to make sure that control is working? So we're still working out. It's an imperfect system. We're still working out some of the kinks in it. Like any system is imperfect, but at the same time, it gives us so much more on the positive side that we will continue to go down that path.
Excellent. Yeah, so just a little bit on the expansion there as well, just to kind of show the diversity of vehicles that it's now been integrated in. So it's not just the off-highway haulage trucks anymore. It's really expanding. And I think this is a relevance, especially to sites that have other types of equipment that maybe aren't just in the context of our open pit or underground mining, where could be a lot of benefit to this on just general construction sites or other operations. And then just kind of a note on like where we're going with this. So like Nelson said, we're working towards working out different kinks and things that we've experienced along the way, but we're also looking to integrate all of this data and figure out how we can use programs like Power BI to really harness this big data set that we're collecting and adding to every single day. We're developing modules within our Torex training academy to ensure that all operators have access to not only training on how to use the device, of course, as new employees get hired on, but training modules on sleep science and fatigue risk management and just personal behavior that they can use. We're also intervening on one-on-one, and so doing coaching on sleep with the physicians teams on site. If an operator is identified to have a sleep disorder, how can they be supported in achieving success with additional advanced medical care? And then we're also doing some different testing for the introduction of other types of technology and supporting things. So one of the programs we're about to do as well. So we're looking to test a blue wake program, which is just kind of a light technology. So it's using blue light to influence the level of alertness of operators. So we're about to launch this project in the next kind of couple of weeks to see if that's something that we can layer in. So have the wearable tech going on. An operator sees, okay, I'm getting a lot of level 3+ warnings. They activate the blue light, and then we'll test to basically see if that does in fact improve their alertness or not. So this is something that's underway currently. So just to wrap up, and we'll do this part quick so we've got more time for questions, but we have some key highlights. Nelson and I kind of sat down together and said, what would others need to know about a program like this to figure out or to get success for themselves? And so scaled it down to kind of 6 key things. And the first one being that we had upper level management buy-in. So Nelson and Jody, who is leadership of our company, really bought in on this from the very first day. And so that was a huge asset to working with the board of directors and working with the management directly on site as well, to ensure that we had that level of support was huge. The second part is building the right team, so the right people with the right skills. Integrating research into this was a fantastic add-on. That's how I obviously got into the program, but I think it added a really great layer. We had physicians directly on site. We have safety experts. We had researchers and statisticians. We had Nelson. We had everybody brought a different little component to the team. And I think that was a really critical part of it, opposed to just, I think in a lot of contexts, fatigue just gets tasked to somebody on a safety team that maybe doesn't have a background in it. And then there's a lot of learning that has to happen in the front end. But when you can build in and integrate some individuals that already have that and create a network to collaborate, it just goes a lot smoother. The third thing was selecting the right tool and the right tech. So doing that due diligence on the front end. So this is just one example of wearable tech. There's tons of other things that you can use wearables for now in different fields. But making sure that you do that due diligence to figure out, okay, is it giving me a leading or a lagging indicator? Is it giving me live feedback? How is the data captured? What's the price point on it? And what's the support team that comes with that data? And so SmartCap really was the right fit for us. But it's thanks to doing that front end work. The fourth is having a scalable approach, so not going too big too fast. This is, like we said, it's been a multi-year plan right from 2020 of doing that big data analysis, figuring out fatigue was the problem, to where we are now and where we're going. If we tried to just say, okay, we're going to buy 150 of these bands and give them to our operators, this program would not have succeeded. We wouldn't have had the buy-in from the front line. It would have been just too much too soon. So really going nice and slow with it. The fifth is just having the perspective that it's prevention, not penalty, but not penalty with the right accountability. So we really viewed this, that the idea is to help make the site safer, make sure that no one's getting injured on site, that they can go home safe. at no point in time is it going to ever be used as a penalty to an employee for having a fatigue state. And then really tied into that as well is this emphasis on worker experience and self-management and not on management monitoring. Not that big brother idea of, oh, the company's just manager watching you with a hawk eye of everything you're doing. It's all about giving the employee the data first. They get it before anyone else does. They have the opportunity to self-manage. They have the opportunity to have their data whenever they choose to have it. And that way it's not just something that's being enforced on them. So it is the right intervention that's happening at the right level within the company.
Great, thanks, Emily. I'll just wrap up. I summarize this slide as, it's our job as leaders to create the environment for folks like Emily and the teams at site and our partners at Wenco through the SmartCap program to create the environment to allow us to methodically implement this thing step by step. And just that continuous, consistent, methodical approach is really what we're going from it. So we don't want to go from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. We want to take our time and really get a good footing before we move on to the next thing. So learn how to walk before you start running type thing. And with that, I believe we're finished. I can turn it over to you, Alan. We can
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. We appreciate this insightful and fantastic presentation. Before we start the Q&A, we want to remind everyone of the evaluation survey we're asking you to complete. The survey will open in a different screen after this webinar, and your input is important because it does help us improve our future webcasts. Let's get to some questions. So the first one, did you have any indications that fatigue was playing a major role in incidents? And if you had that data that pointed to that, how did you gather and derive that information?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So Emily started working with us through an organization called CROSH, Center for Research Excellence and Safety. Emily, you're going to have to help me out the acronym.
Center for Research on Occupational Safety and Health.
That's right. I always stumble on that one. But that when Emily and I started working together, I tasked her with doing about 2 or 3 deep dives on different sources of data. One of them was the COVID data we were tracking. The other one was the 7-8 years of safety data that we built up from safety incidents. And one thing that we found was that a critical issue was fatigue was a factor in many of the incidents, whether it was near misses or actual equipment damage. On the, we've got 100-ton haul trucks on site and other large pieces of equipment. So making sure that the driver was not fatigued was a key point of that. And as we're looking into that, we were also implementing Safe Start. And so we really tried to stitch together the Safe Start program with the preventative measures we took through SmartCap and some of the interventions we take now with, we're going to be testing the Blue Wake program, but we've got the coffee and, moving away from the energy drinks if we can. But there are things that we can do to intervene with the folks when they start showing fatigue, including naps, prescribed naps.
One thing I'll just add to that as well. So the word indicators was used there. A lot of the times in historic data for safety, we don't have direct indicators that state fatigue was the issue here, right? But what we did instead is we looked to things like, okay, is there trends with the time of day that accidents are happening? So are we seeing more accidents happening between 1 and 3 a.m. or at 3 to 4 p.m. when we have that post-lunch level of fatigue come into play? We looked at things where no other cause could have been, or no other cause was reported from it. We looked at how the situations were described. And so looking beyond just direct statements of fatigue was the problem, but trying to get other metrics that could indicate it. But then that's part of the value of now having a wearable tech or having live data that's recording is moving forward. We can directly say fatigue was at play here, or we need to look to other concerns for complacency or other factors that could have resulted in the accident taking place. But I think looking beyond just a direct indicator and thinking about what else factors into fatigue is a good way to go back into your own historic data as well.
Now, you all kind of mentioned this in the previous answer, but have you developed any actions that can be taken once a member gets an alarm? Are there any recommended exercises? And are you looking at any potential for automation to remove or reduce the mundane work from your members?
So,
Emily, you want to do the first part of that?
Yeah, I can do the first part. So we have designed a bunch of different intervention tools now. So we have, working with the team on site, we designed some kind of almost like process flow charts. So if an operator right now receives a level 3+ alarm, they're the only one that receives that data live. And basically that's their opportunity to intervene. If they receive another alarm, another level 3+ alarm within the next, I believe it's a 5-minute window, then we get a notification to the dispatch team. So that dispatch then radios them and says, hey, what's going on in the cab? Just they kind of have an opportunity to talk through it, create a short-term intervention plan of, okay, you're about to have your next break. What can we do in the immediate term to help make sure you're not getting to a level 4 alarm? If the operator gets the level 3+ alarm and then it goes to a level 4 alarm within 2 minutes, that goes directly to the supervisor. It also goes to the dispatch, and then the team radios to the operator and they create a direct plan as well. So there's some opportunity for self-intervention when that gets eliminated because it's advanced to another level 3+ alarm or a level 4. We change the level of severity, and that data goes live via SMS to the cell phone of the supervisor. And it also goes to, there's an entire monitoring system in the dispatch where all of this data is happening live, and a giant red band comes up on the screen to get the attention of the dispatcher so that they can intervene. And I use the word immediate because we treat it that way, but receiving a level 3+ alarm or a level 4 does not mean that the operator is about to fall asleep. It's about 8 minutes. Before a micro sleep could take place. So you don't have these type of brainwaves and then automatically you're going to be falling asleep. So we've got not really big, but we have a window of opportunity there to intervene. So it's not an absolute falling asleep kind of recording. And so we've got all of those different processes in place. If an operator receives more than 2 level 4 alarms, they're pulled from operation and they're sent back to the main office, and then they have an opportunity to meet with a physician or take, like Nelson said, a prescribed nap. There's bunkhouses on site where they can go and do that if that's going to be what's necessary to protect them. And so we've got some different levels of severity. And then again, if an operator is somebody that's showing a lot of repeat alarms every single shift or every single night shift, then they also get brought in to have a one-on-one with the physician's team, like any normal medical appointment would, where they can look at things more specifically and address their metrics.
And we're always looking to eliminate redundant and repetitive work where health and safety is a factor, right? We have an ergonomics team that looks into that.
Well, thank you to you both. Unfortunately, we have run out of time today. I'd like to thank our awesome presenters, Nelson Bondarchuk and Emily Tetzloff, everyone at Safe Start and Torex Gold, and of course, all of our listeners. Take care and have a safe day.
Thank you, folks. It's been a pleasure.